Fitness with Paul Rosen.
Our diets, our Western diets in America are just really, you just don't realize how poor they really are.
What would you say to others who would like to feel better?
Sometimes you need to find the instruction. That's where the testing and everything comes in, because without that knowledge, there's no way I could have got to the point where I'm at today.
Straight talk about health.
And then I start preaching and telling them what I've been doing. And this guy named Paul Rosen has changed my life.
With your host, Paul Rosen.
By the way, the information contained in this program is not approved by the FDA, nor intended to treat, diagnose, or claim to cure any medical condition or disease as defined by Western medicine. However, skilled practitioners of many disciplines have found nutrition response testing to be a highly reliable supportive technology for assessing the health and fitness of the body's functional system.
A few years ago, Paul, there was a great biography of Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple Computer. The book was by Walter Isaacson, the journalist. Apparently, Steve Jobs made his health worse late in his life by fad dieting. One of the things he did was eat a diet of only apples, kid you not, at one point. I guess we all, Paul, are susceptible to falling into the trap of fad diets. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. And, of course, there are so many fads out there and traps to fall into. And they all, tout their particular approach. And the truth of the matter is there's really only one approach. And the thing is, because food is so important to all of us, and it is absolutely essential in order to thrive, as a human being on the planet, there's this struggle to know which foods would make a person healthier.
So let me ask you this, Paul, to personalize this. You've talked very frankly about your health issues when you were younger, maybe 20 years ago, something like that, 25 years ago. Did you ever fall prey to a fad diet or maybe some kind of diet plan that you'd failed to think out properly and therefore maybe did yourself no good at all with?
Well, the way you couch that question, I don't think people are. I think people are reaching out for some kind of answer. And the information, unfortunately, as we've talked many times on the show, there's so much mis and disinformation across the board that it's very hard for an individual who hasn't discovered for themselves already what the best approach is. After searching for many, many years to find out what worked best for me, what I discovered was that the diet. Well, actually, I'll tell you what I discovered in a second. Let's go over some of these diets.
All right. So we'll hear about Paul's personal experience momentarily, but first, what do you mean by some of these diets?
Well, some of the diets that would be called fad approaches are things like the blood type diet, where the individual who created this particular diet through some research of his own basically sort of separated people by blood types. So if you had a blood type O, your diet should mainly consist of high protein and fat and vegetables and very, very few fruits and grains. Or if it was blood type A, it was supposed to be a meat-free diet based on fruits and vegetables, beans and legumes. Or blood type B, where there was, kind of a combination, avoiding corn and wheat and lentils and keeping the meats to low-fat meats.
On the surface, Paul, that doesn't sound unappealing in the sense that designing your diet around your blood type sounds like you're individualizing your plan, for one thing. It also sounds properly clinical. If you're looking for a medical approach to creating your diet, something like the blood type diet, on paper, doesn't seem to sound so bad.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Blood type AB, the last one, foods focusing on fermented soy and seafood and dairy and green vegetables. I mean, all of this sounds really good. And the problem is that it turns out there are so many different blood type ABs, Bs, As, and Os. That is to say, there are many, many, many factors, genetic factors and that differentiate, within the AB community or the O community or the A community, and those things sometimes make it so that the just following the directives of the book, people don't get the results that they're looking for. There's a reason for that. And then there's the metabolic type diet.
Before you continue with that, Paul, I'm guessing, to summarize, that the blood type diet isn't individualized enough because there are other factors that play into it besides your blood type, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Then there's the metabolic type, which is, again, an approach that separates people by virtue of how fast or how slow your digestive
your
operations
metabolism
work. Yes.
So how do you determine that, the speed of your metabolism?
A questionnaire. So
okay.
A promoter of that particular approach basically provides you with a questionnaire, and depending on how you answer the questions,
I picture
sorted out.
Picture a guy in a
surgical
questionnaire. No. I picture a guy in a surgical gown with a stopwatch. Timing your metabolism.
Yeah.
But I mean, is
You've
the questionnaire
got a very creative memory?
Creative something.
Yeah.
I question whether that questionnaire can really determine that accurately.
Well, again, it does give some people some guidance in a way that they wouldn't have any guidance at all, and it can be quite useful. But again, it falls short of what it could be, right? So now you can put together blood type, you can put together metabolic type, and knowing both of those things, you're reaching more success. And then there's the low-fat diet, known as the Pritikin diet. That particular diet, I'm not a big fan of that because fat is extremely important, and we're going to go into more about fat, but fat is extremely important to the body's ability to maintain overall health in general.
And that one's been around for a while, has it not, the Pritikin diet?
It has. And yet, there definitely have been people who have benefited from using the Pritikin structure.
Actually, what I'm surprised to hear so far, Paul, is that you're not necessarily slamming these diets in an overall sense. You're just saying they're too limited.
Well, from one standpoint, anybody who reaches out to and tries to take responsibility for what they're putting in your mouth, I applaud. I mean, it's like, woohoo!
I can see that, but I guess from my more cynical consumer's point of view, it seems some of these diets, maybe not the ones you've mentioned so far, but others like Steve Jobs and his all-apple diet, those things are promising to be quick fixes. And instead, as in his case, they just make things worse.
I've been restraining myself on that particular example that you're using, but it is kind of ironic, isn't it, that he would choose that particular approach?
Yeah, it is. And it's
based on the fact that he is the
co-founder of Apple Computer.
Of Apple.
Right.
So, let's take that with a grain of salt.
I think that's coincidence, that by itself is coincidence.
Irony.
I only bring him up, and I'll bring him up now for the last time, because he was such a high-profile figure who obviously died too young, died of cancer. And again, his dietary...
Pancreatic, as I believe.
Yes, his dietary choices did not lead to that, but they certainly did not improve his health. And if you saw Steve Jobs in the last years of his life, the guy didn't look good.
Well, nobody does in the last years of their life. I mean, if they're dying from disease.
But he wasn't that old, he wasn't.
But he was dying from disease.
Okay,
so
I got that. But I can't help but think his poor dietary choices contributed to his appearance as well as his bad overall health.
Well, if he knew that he had some problem with his pancreas and he was eating fruit, then he was making a huge mistake from the get-go.
Well, there you go. And again, bottom line, we won't bring it up again, but there you have a very smart guy doing something very quacky to try and improve his health.
Back to fat.
There you go.
Fat has been demonized so broadly in this country and in this culture that the myths that we generally have to overcome, like saturated fat is the cause of heart disease, is just a huge barrier, and people are just reaching for anything that they can see as as an alternative. And but nothing could be farther from the truth. And how it got started was politics. The low-fat craze was politics and power. It wasn't science. It wasn't observation. It wasn't proof. It was just politics and power. So it like, for example, the idea that saturated fat and cholesterol, high cholesterol, are the cause of heart disease is absolutely insane. In fact, more of the science is proven just exactly the opposite.
So, for our purposes, for today's discussion, that leads to so-called low-fat diets, and I guess we're going to get to the point you're going to make, which is that people who are going on these diets aren't doing themselves any good.
Well, the profit motive and the capitalistic approach is basically predictable, and so if you've got these people out there, touting how heart disease is related to fat, then the low-fat craze is obviously coming next, and it has, and unfortunately, it's probably done more damage across the board than any other approach, besides eating processed food every day.
Well, that's horrifying to hear because I think many of us still buy into that myth. We've discussed it many times before. But if you talk to almost any consumer on the street, they'll say, sure, fat and cholesterol are just bad for you and bad for your heart in particular.
Yeah, well, it's because they've heard it so many times. It's the typical, it's getting that message out there over and over and over and over. And then ultimately believing it, whether it's true or not. And oh my gosh, do we have a ton of additional, examples of that particular approach on many levels in our culture, right? Just keep saying it. And eventually, people just accept it as fact, and it's not. The foundational study for the cholesterol story was attributed to a study done by medical doctors in Framingham, Massachusetts. This was back in the 60s. However, despite the public display touting the lowering of your saturated fat intake to prevent heart disease, Dr. William Costelli, who was one of the directors of the study, found, and I quote, the more saturated fat one ate, the more cholesterol one ate, the more calories one ate, the lower people's serum cholesterol. Now, that's totally, contrary to what ultimately what has been promoted over these last 50 plus years, right?
That's right.
We found that people who ate the most cholesterol, ate the most saturated fat, ate the most calories, weighed the least, and were the most physically fit. That was in their study. That's
pretty amazing. And entirely contrary to the perceived wisdom, is that correct?
The diet heart hypothesis, which is the fat heart hypothesis, has been repeatedly shown to be wrong, and yet, for these complicated reasons of pride, profit, and prejudice, the hypothesis continues to be exploited not just by the business, but by scientists, fundraising enterprises, of course the food companies, and even governmental agencies. The public has been deceived by the greatest health scam of the century, and lots of people are finding this out, and of course the subsequent diets like the blood type and the Mediterranean and the South Beach and the so many of these approaches that ultimately turned out to be fad approaches, where people were urged to eat protein and more high quality saturated fat and reduce the grains and sugars, right? Noticed that their health improved in ways that they hadn't up to that point, right? They were actually contrary, following the contrarian approach, contrary to the information that was being promoted by the government and by the people promoting things like low fat and cholesterol is the cause of heart disease, etc.
So again, you have this massive industry growing up around this misconception, and that economic incentive is huge. Is that right?
Yeah, the craziness about it was that the people who were promoting low fat were promoting things like margarine and trans fats, right? Fat substances that were actually whipped up in a laboratory, a chemical lab, which have ultimately proved factually, scientifically, to be really, really hazardous to your health, in particular, heart health. Right? That was the outcome of demonizing, whole food saturated fats from beef and other meats and butter and eggs, all of which are extremely essential to a healthy diet. For most folks, because some people do need to avoid dairy and eggs at some point, depending on their condition. And again, I'm going to share with you how you can determine that, how to know that with certainty. But all of the foods, the whole foods that were ultimately shelved in favor of the low-fat approach or the no-fat approach have all been shown to be less healthy, all of them. It's amazing.
We're discussing diets this morning on Health Matters and why they could be good or bad for you depending on what you pick. Overall, you need to pick what's right for you.
Well, when you say ultimately pick what's right for you, based on what? Based on what information? Well, it's an easy thing to say, but that's why they're picking fad diets, because they think it's right for them. But there is a way that you don't have to be left on your own to guess, to try to figure out which one of the many, many, many diets would be appropriate for you. That's what I'm going to share with you.
And when we talk about fad diets, too, Paul, to belabor the point on purpose, they, to me, seem like quick fixes. That's why people pick them, because maybe they're having some kind of health issue, being overweight, whatever it is. They're looking for the quick fix, and therefore they pick the fad diet.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true, but they're trying to do something. At least they're picking. Right, there's more people who aren't picking than there are people who are picking.
I wonder if, too, they're not making the mistake of, in our information-ready age, of doing their own research, going online and, trying to pick out things they think are right for them or particular to their circumstance, and making bad decisions because they're really not getting the proper information. They think they are because there's a lot of stuff online, a lot of legitimate information online, but maybe, without some counseling or some more expert help, people make bad decisions.
Find out via nutrition response testing and the additional technology that I'm using in my office, heart sound recording, which is really cool, and I'll talk about that sometime later in the show. And then you can identify with the highest degree of certainty exactly what foods you should be avoiding and what foods you should be embracing. And it is this approach, after years and years of search and research, that I did when I was at my sickest, that got me where I needed to be. After researching, and I was a professional doing the research, not just a layperson. And after sorting through all of the potential diets available to me, finding this particular technology was what put me over the top. That's what enabled me to regain my health. And when you think about it, it's a good example for you fishermen and women out there. If you want to catch fish and you're in uncharted territory, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a guide? Someone who knows the river, the stream, the lake, the ocean? Wouldn't it be a good idea? Right? Very few fishermen go out in the ocean without a fish finder these days, right? A device to be able to identify where the schools of fish are. Right? If you want to catch fish, you need a guide. No matter how much you squiggle, wiggle, and resist, right? Sure, you may go out there and get lucky. But for most folks, how much time do you want to waste? How much time do you want to spend going through an area which you're really not familiar with, right? It's the unfamiliarity that takes a lot of the air out of and most of the success out of finding the dietary approach that will work for you.
I think. Katie. Okay, Katie.
Yeah,
there we go.
Katie patient of mine discovered this. She finally threw up her hands and go, you know what? I've been doing this, and I'm not successful. I'm, now in dangerous territory, using some prescription medications. And you know what? I'm going to find a guide. And let's hear it from her. Katie, how did you hear about nutrition response testing?
On KPAM.
On KPAM.
Right. I heard you, like I told you last week, I heard you 3 times before I actually called.
It took 3 times.
It took 3 times.
Yeah.
The first time I thought, oh, yeah, right. And then the second time I was going to call Monday morning, the first thing. And I didn't. And so then the third time I heard you, I thought, okay, I am calling tomorrow morning. He is talking about everything that I feel.
And what was I talking about?
Okay, just indigestion, bloating, gas, just feeling reflex, just everything that you're talking about today too. That's what I was doing. That's what I was experiencing.
So many of us really experience this before we actually find out, what our nutritional deficiencies and barriers to healing are. Of course, you didn't know what those were until I actually introduced them to you, but
right.
But yeah, so you were experiencing all those things, and so what was it about? What was it about? Me or the show? I'm always so curious that kind of caught your attention. Was it just the symptoms? Talking about the symptoms, or
right? It was, because I was just thinking, and then there were people that were calling in, and were kind of saying the same thing and how their lives have changed. And I thought, doggone it, maybe mine will too. Make me feel better. I didn't, because I thought I was eating pretty well and doing really everything pretty well, and
yeah.
Boy, when you get off of some of the things that you suggest to take totally out of your diet.
And what happens?
You hate to. It does make such a difference.
It makes a difference. So you thought, you were not, you were actually doing some things for yourself. What were all the things that you were doing?
Well, I thought I was eating very healthy, and I was eating a lot of spinach, my friend spinach, remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
I was eating spinach breakfast, lunch, and dinner practically.
Yeah.
Loved it, and I just thought I was being very, very healthy, good iron source and whatever.
Right.
And obviously, I feel so different not eating it.
And not eating spinach.
I know.
But spinach is, Popeye, the whole thing, it's like...
Spinach smoothies even.
Yeah. So you were basically killing yourself slowly, even though the spinach might necessarily not be a problem for somebody else. That's what you learned, right?
Right, exactly.
So you got your evaluation. Was the evaluation, uncomfortable? Was it?
No, not at all. No, very nice. You don't like Veronica, I believe, or whoever was the
Vanessa.
caller, right? Said you don't have to take your clothes off. You don't have to do blood tests. You don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. And it was very painless
and accurate.
Very professional, very accurate. Yeah, and
yeah.
So I think I've been doing this for like a month now.
A month.
8 months or 5 weeks, one or the other.
Yeah.
And I feel so different. It's amazing.
Tell me, explain it for people. First of all, you got the evaluation, then you got your individualized nutritional healing program.
Right. And my supplements, and I'm a person that has a real hard time remembering to take pills. If I have a prescription for something, I have a very, very difficult time remembering to do that. So I've been very diligent.
And why? So what makes this easier?
I don't know. It's just kind of a mind over matter type thing that I'm going to do this because I am feeling better and I want to continue to feel better.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And I feel more aware. I'm just like...
Isn't that interesting?
I'm like aware and stronger. It's just amazing. And I was not sleeping very well.
So symptom-wise, what were all the symptoms that you were having that you are either not having now or are having less of them?
Okay. The bloating. I would eat something, and it wouldn't even have to be that much at all, and I would just feel like I was just bloated to the gills. And that's gone. Totally gone.
Wow.
And the not sleeping. I'd sleep like 3 or 4 hours a night. And I'm up to like 6 or 7, so that's a definite improvement for me.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it really is.
Because that's in so many ways the foundation.
Right. And much better quality sleep, I think, also. I'm not waking up. You know what I mean?
Right.
You'd be waking up every half an hour,
right,
whatever, and then go back to sleep a little bit. And so I'm not doing that any longer. And just feeling so much better. In fact, before I would eat something, again, thinking it was very healthy, very good for me.
Like what?
What was that? What did you take me off of? Well, grains.
Some grains, yeah.
grains, and I just thought that breads were my friend. And so I would have like a sandwich or something like that. I'd go to a deli and get a nice little sandwich, or I'd go to Subway and get a sandwich or something. And I'd think, well, this is really healthy. It's got lots of veggies in it, and within about an hour, my stomach would be just like turning and growling, and I was like, well, this is really weird. And again, that bloaty feeling.
Right.
So and I don't have that.
So hearing that, Paul, one of the things that sticks out to me is I wonder why people most commonly seek out a diet. I would think it's because of weight issues, but there you have Katie who had digestive problems and a number of other things going on. In your experience, do most people seek to lose weight when they're picking a diet?
Yes. And most people have that as have that as the in the forefront. That's their main issue. And yet when you question them a little bit, you find out that they have various different types of symptoms that come and go or that are present on a regular basis. They may even be taking over-the-counter medications, many of them, right? And they're looking for a diet. And then there are some people who just, recognize how important their health quality is and are, being preventative about it. But like I said, what happens is we think, in all of our research, et cetera, out there, this sounds good and that sounds good. And the reason there are so many different dietary approaches out there is because there are so many different types of people. All right, this kind of escapes us. And so we think, oh, well, this diet helped this person. They've got the same symptoms I do. Certainly it's going to help me. And a lot of the times it doesn't.
One more note, you can get a free chapter of Paul Rosen's book, The Missing Piece. Just go to his website, acunatural.com, acunatural.com, and fill out the dialog box that pops up. Rest assured, no information you provide will ever be shared with anyone else. So, what are you waiting for? Get going on your personal road to wellness today.